Welcome to the Ask for Football Army Football Show. The Army Football Show is an insider's guide for cadets, old grads, and college football fans to follow the Army team throughout their season as they seek to beat Navy and claim the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. Ask for Football is brought to you by our sponsor, Jocelyn Bradley Real Estate. Whether you're buying, selling, or just exploring your options, Jocelyn Bradley is the expert you can trust to navigate the real estate market with ease. Visit jocelynbradley.com to learn more. And let's get started at the Ask for Football Army Football Show.
Now, if I was really heartless, I would cut the show off and end the live stream because it's April the 1st, but we are not that ruthless. So welcome back to the Ask for Football Army Football Show. We're talking actually lax this week. It's spring sports is probably the easiest way to say it. Army men and women's lax had huge wins, and I mean huge over the weekend. Both got signature wins. Army football had one of its first scrimmages heading in the spring game, and we've got spring game coming up in 2 weeks. How are we feeling? We'll start with James, over to Lynn, and then we'll close out with Dan. How's everybody feeling, and who got to watch or see the game at all? We'll stop there and toss it over to you.
Well, I am. I wouldn't say I'm elite, but I'm now officially a coastal dweller again. So I'm halfway in Dan's company. Dan lives on the Sound. I live on the Gulf of America, so it's a little bit different culture. I watched both games. Stanford was a huge win for women's lax at home. Cool to see that program continuing to reach new heights. And then obviously the big game against North Carolina and the return game from last year really puts Army in a good spot going forward as far as the national scene goes.
Awesome. Lynn, how about you?
I haven't really been to a spring game. Spring practice as much. Most of my stuff has been lacrosse right now, other sports, but I'm excited about the spring game coming up on the 11th. I think the quarterbacks are what we're looking at right now. That's going to be the interesting piece of this. When I interviewed Coach Munkin, he said that was going to be the interesting part was the quarterback position. I mean, you have Coleman with the most on-field experience, but then you have Mundell coming back from an injury he's very shifty and has wheels. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where those guys fall. Other than that, we have some experienced returning players coming back that I'm super excited to see what happens with them. And I think that was part of what Munkin was talking about was that seeing who will step up and step into those positions as the season continues. But other than that, I'm super, super excited to see where the ebb and flow goes with the difference of changing the style of play this season. Now that Daly is out and his quarterback style was completely different than what we've seen in the past. We might see the going back to where they're changing their subs out on their quarterbacks like they did in the past based on whatever they're running. So that's really exciting to see. Other than that, it was all lacrosse, and I think we'll get to that a little bit later.
For sure. Dano, how about you?
Just happy to be here, hoping to help the team in the playoffs. Glad I actually made it on time because it was not a 100% sure thing there for a minute.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of big victories, you can get a big victory when you're looking for a new home. So we have a realtor that can help you out and find a spot for you to hang your hat. If you're PCSing to the Fort Bragg area, we have the realtor for you, Jocelyn Bradley. Jocelyn is a veteran who spent her Army career in logistics. There, she discovered her passion for making a difference in people's lives. She's committed to helping her clients find their dream homes when they're in the market, and she provides exceptional service when she's working for you. Jocelyn has decided to support Ask for Football this season, and she's the right person to get you into the home of your dreams. Jocelyn also has an extended network of veteran realtors who can support you if you're moving somewhere else in the country. So if you're in the market for a home, Jocelyn should be your first call. You don't have to be specifically moving to North Carolina or the Fort Bragg area. She still has connections all over the country. Believe it or not, the West Point Network has a bunch of grads that are realtors. So get connected with those folks that are actually in those markets. They can help you find a home, and Jocelyn can be your first call to help you point you in the right direction. But moving on. So we've got the Army football scrimmage report. So the first thing, if you watch the socials at all, it's the Army air raid. So brace yourselves. We're going to be throwing the ball a whole bunch next season. or psych as per SOP. You know, like we see a lot of we see a lot of quarterback receiver play in spring ball, and then it never really translates to anything on the field. And I think we're okay with that. But Sal had some news from Black Knight Nation, news that came in, you know, as Lynn already noted. Quarterback battle is wide open. Hey, welcome to Army off-season football. I think that's the main thing that we talk about every year is, you know, who's going to step in as the number one QB. Coleman has probably the best arm. Washington is the biggest. He's 6'1", 200. He's probably the closest to like stature that we had last season. But I seriously doubt we'll know who's going to be starting before the first game against Tarleton State on August the 29th. We'll be guessing until then. I don't even think Coach Monken would tell. Like, even if he knew who he's going to start, he wouldn't say anything. We know that's just the way that he is. Nor is it guaranteed that one guy is going to hold the starter's position all year. So we've seen rotating quarterbacks before, as Lynn mentioned, but we've also seen different packages rotate in and out throughout the course of the season. The other part of it is Coach Monken has also noted a bunch of guys that have switched positions in the offseason. He described the depth at fullback as a log jam. So you got a bunch of talented guys in the B-back position. So if you're a fan of fullbacks, hey, welcome to the Army team. Like, we've got a bunch of them. Hopefully we'll get to see a lot of those guys get showcased. A bunch of last year's recruited tight ends have also moved to either tackle or defensive end, depending upon their physical size and skill set. 6'7" rising yearling Grayson Baker is now a defensive end. We'll see how that goes. That's exactly what got Andre Carter in the spotlight, and he is now playing in the National Football League. So who knows what can happen there. And Army recruited something like 8 tight ends last season, and I would assume that there's going to be more position swishes as we move in. And finally, I'll let Dan take this one because I'll hand this crowning achievement over to him. But it's unfortunate that Jordan is not here to make this news. Dano, over to you.
Yeah, man. This is like a banner day for Jordan, and it's quite sad that he's not on in the week that Navy Athletic Director Chet Gladchuk retires after 24 years driving the ship. Gladchuk was the second longest tenured AD in the FBS. They say this report comes via Chris Vanini. They say that he'll remain invested or involved in capital projects. I have no idea what that means. Are they building a new stadium, or who freaking knows? But yeah, that's one of Jordan's favorite people, and we're gonna miss having Chet around to kick around, I think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I know some guys that are in the Navy graduate network that I talk to offline. They will remain nameless, so they don't get freaking hunted down in the streets. But I text them, I was like, "Hey, you see this?" And they're like, "Yay!" And it was like, "Whoa, all right." Well, obviously, there's a reason probably why he left.
One of my favorite beat Navy things was him, after that Air Force debacle at home, going upstairs in a drunken rage and firing the offensive coordinator, only for Ken to talk him down. I see James shaking his head.
You guys, he has been wanting to retire for like 6 years. He felt like he couldn't do it because Navy football was in the dumps, and then they have a good year and he retired. Like, it's a very simple formula. Like, he got Navy football to a new level with Keenan Reynolds. And then after Keenan left, they had like the one good year with Malcolm, but they were in the dumps. He's an old man who wants to just hang up the cleats, but he didn't feel like he could do it after a 3-win Navy year. So he waited until Navy had a good year. He brought in a new coach. He fired Ken when he fired Ken because he wanted to retire and he needed to have a program that had a decent number of wins. He wins the CIC and has a double-digit year, and he retired. Like, it's not that complicated.
Oh, I know it's not complicated, but I think we get to take a victory lap, or at least celebrate the accomplishment of outliving him.
I mean, the dude is the most successful AD in the Patriot League, probably in the history of the Patriot League. So I don't know that there's a victory to be had.
Well, maybe so. Who knows? I still want to know what the capital project is that he's on. Is he like?
I mean, they're building that lacrosse center. I don't know how much that has to do with it, but
yeah,
interesting.
We'll see.
Okay.
So back to Army football. So, what are your thoughts on the pregame read, pre-spring stuff? We'll start with Dan, pass it to James, and end up with Lynn.
Yeah, Sal in his report published a depth chart, and it looks like there's a lot of returning experience, especially on defense, which I don't think I was necessarily tracking before I'd seen it in print. They need to find 2 starting safeties, and I don't they need to find 2 new tackles, but they've still got, center Brady Small, both guards. That's a lot to build on the offensive line. At fullback, Hayden Reed, Jake Rendina, Carson Smith, and Briggs Bartosh. All those guys saw at least some time, and there were a couple other guys that I'd never heard of named in there. You got slot backs, Noah Short and Samari Howard coming back. Wide receiver, Liam Fortner. So they'll be looking for a couple more wide receivers. And, I feel like we talk about tight end all the time. I'm not going to get into it, but that's obviously something for us to watch during the spring game is how, our friend's kid does.
Yeah. James, how about you?
Yeah, I don't really care about spring football. It means nothing to me. Like, you could have a clear number 1 quarterback coming out of spring camp, and then all of a sudden in the fall it changes. Like, I've stopped trying to draw conclusions about what's going to happen in the fall based on what happens in the spring.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Lynn, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I love the spring game. I think I see like James's point, but I love the spring game. I like to see like where they go from the spring game onto the season to see who is stepping up into those positions and how they develop from spring into the fall, just to see like growth, which it gives you an idea of where they are in growth. I do think that we have a lot of returning experienced players that are going to be important to where the team goes this year. I think they're going to lean on those experienced players to move forward. It'll be interesting to see who kind of steps up into those leadership roles throughout from the spring game into the fall season.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, and not to turn this into a college football roundtable, but I'll put my roundtable hat on for a second. I think the best part of Army is player development. And like, we'll get to see guys that have grown up in the program kind of, either make it to where they should be or continue to get some more work. I think there's really only 4 FBS teams that take accountability of not using the transfer portal for bringing people in. And that's Army, Navy, and Air Force, obviously, and then Clemson. And word around the campfire is Clemson has a pretty solid team, and those guys are hungry because they've been growing up in that organization. So we'll see what Clemson does this season. Hopefully they don't Clemson, but if it is, it's a headline. The other part of
what are we talking about here?
Yeah. Well, but the other part of it is like, I think the biggest thing that you see is teams that hold on to their core players, have a better chance of performing throughout the season rather than, at the beginning and the end. So if you look at teams that got caught early, a lot of those teams that got caught early had a heavy transfer portal, grouping of athletes to come in, and then they kind of leveled up towards the end of the season. Ohio State being one of those teams, they bought in some talent, kind of cultivated it, still had some oopsies and uh-ohs in the middle of the season, but still were able to piece it all together and make a pretty deep run into the playoff. And so it's just going to be interesting to see. I think Army will benefit from the lack of player turbulence. And, with the guys that do leave, to be quite honest, I don't think we'll miss them anyway, because there's just as many talented players still on the roster that can make up the difference. And for me personally, again, I'll be watching the defensive line because Coach Smith is coming in as a new defensive line coach. He's replacing Coach Cronin, who left with Coach Drinkle. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does because he's got a lot of experience, man. The guy's been coaching defensive line for a while, so it'll be interesting to see what wrinkles he brings to the defensive line this season. But, of course, front seven is kind of where I always watch the game. And speaking of a line, we got a guy who can get you a line on a great mortgage for your house, and that is Craig Oxane, area sales manager and mortgage broker at the Money Store. So if you've listened to Ask for Football before, we've got sponsor here.
We're going to lose our sponsors, by the way, if these keep getting this bad.
Oh, come on. That one was great. I love that one.
It's like, look, I have to do something because I'm not bringing any much more content to the show. So I got to give some ridiculous segues. All right. So he's a class of 94 grad, can lend in all 50 states. He's one of the most successful VA lenders in the our country. He gives you super competitive rates. Craig's going to give you the best deal he possibly can. Friends, the mortgage process is super confusing with interest rates moving all over the place. Now is not the time to deal with some clown who's just trying to make a buck off of you. Deal with somebody who actually cares, not a call center, some random big box bank or mindless website. This is how that West Point network functions. Craig is helping us stay in business here at Ask for Football, and we're helping you get a better deal on a mortgage by introducing you to the very man that you need to meet. Plus, Craig does not charge lenders fees for veterans. That's a huge savings. $1,300. Get that money, friends. Craig Oxane, area sales manager at the Money Store. Check him out. The link is on our website. Moving into lacrosse coverage. Like, there is a lot to talk about in both men and women's lacrosse. And I think, years ago that was not how things were. And as the teams have started to develop, and I will tell you, it's embarrassment of riches for Army sports right now. So if you're watching them, like, most of the teams are pretty doggone good. So if there's a sporting event that you can get to, I would say check them out, because majority of the teams are doing well in the spring sports too. So a lot of success with the basketball team. Lacrosse is continuing to roll. Rugby is rolling, and, just more to come. But we're here to cover lacrosse. Dano, over to you. Let's talk As for Lax.
So, yeah, as we said in the opening, the Army women beat. I have seen anywhere between number 4 to number 6 Stanford this past week. They beat them 12-9. Then they blasted the absolute crap out of Lafayette 21-2 against Stanford. Allison Riley had 5 goals, 2 assists. Bridget Duffy had 2 goals, 4 assists, 8 draw controls, 2 ground balls, and an already outstanding career. That might have been her best performance as a Black Knight. Feels like maybe this was the first time she really stepped up against one of these national level programs and showed what she can do, which is awesome. Goalie Lindsay Seraphine had 19 saves. That is insane. So with this win this week, the team is ranked again. Inside Lacrosse has them 22nd. Coaches poll has them 25th. USA Lacrosse has them 18th. Lynn, you were the only one of us, I think, that watched all of this game. I only caught the fourth quarter, and you were there. So what did you think?
Oh my gosh. It was, from the very beginning to the end, it was just pure excitement. It just, the team is just really, they're just a lot of fun. Allison Riley just came out on fire. Just 3 goals that first quarter, and they did not allow Stanford to score a goal. I mean, it was just incredible. And, watching Bridget Duffy play, she's a beast. She just unleashed on them. I think, Stanford came back after halftime when it was tied. I think it was 5-5 at half, and they come out and they take the lead for the first time. I think it was like 6-7 Stanford, and Bridget Duffy was not having it. She just, coming off of a draw, she was going straight to the goal, and I don't know what happened. I don't know if she got tripped or she was about to fall, but she took this really odd lunge towards the goal, like she was about to fall, and she shot and she scored. And I think she shocked herself because everybody else was shocked. Running over to the teammates after, she kind of grasped her face, like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And there was one of her teammates, I don't know who it was in the background, just kind of like, oh my God, what just happened? There was no stopping her. She was winning draws. She was assisting goals. When we were thinking she was going to shoot, she would pass over and, to another teammate, and they would score. And the excitement just continued. They just were not having it. Stanford took hit a couple of the girls, on the head, that created penalties for them that I think it kind of changed the dynamic on the field a little bit. You could tell it took it down a notch for Stanford, and Army just capitalized on it. They just stood tall and played a great game. It was exciting. It was fun to watch this group. They play with fire. They lean on each other. The sidelines were going crazy. They're just really a lot of fun. That Riley and Duffy both played on the U20 USA lacrosse team together, and they played with Aaliyah Pulaski from Stanford. And after the game was over, they were kind of chit-chatting over on the sidelines, which was really nice to see. It was fun to see them together. But it was a great game to be photographing. It was just, they gave me some of the most incredible opportunities to get some great shots of them. And the vibe was just amazing. It was just a great place to be.
I really, like I said, I only caught the fourth quarter, but I really enjoyed going back through your photo gallery. It's such a unique opportunity. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but that's been really one of the better things that we've done this off season, to kind of work through and work that in, because there's some amazing stuff in there.
Thank you. Yeah.
As we said, the men beat number 5 North Carolina on Saturday in front of fully 5,000 fans. That's coming off a week in which they put at least 3,000 fans in the stadium against Boston University. Final score 13-12. Same score as last year, same result. Didn't need overtime. That's really the only difference. Jackson Eicher had a sock trick, which is a new one on me. I hadn't heard that one until this week, with 6 goals plus an assist. Evan Plunkett had a goal and 5 assists, so that just gives you the dynamic right there, attack and midfield. Plebes Hill, Plunkett, and Braden Fountain each had 2 goals. Short stick defensive midfielder Christian Mazer had maybe his best game as a Black Knight, which is cool because we met his mom before the Boston University game. He caused 2 turnovers, had 2 ground balls. The dude was everywhere. Like, he was constantly forcing attackers outside or past a goal, just preventing them from getting their hands free or being able to get a shot. AJ Pilot drew probably his toughest assignment of the season, guarding UNC attacker Owen Duffy. Duffy is a good player. He finished with 4 goals, but every single one of them was like this crazy wraparound, insane thing, highlight reel play. So, even with that, Pilot finished with 4 ground balls, 3 cost turnovers, held Duffy in check for the final minute plus, which was a big deal. And finally, goalie Sean Byrne had 10 saves. Kind of a rough first half, but he looked like himself definitely in the second half and especially late in the game. And Army men's lacrosse now 6th in the nation in both polls. James, you got anything?
Yeah, a couple things. I know we're going to talk tournament. I don't know if you want to do that yet, but as far as the game goes, I want to check here. I want to find the stats because I remember looking at them. The serial lack of assists from North Carolina was kind of crazy. So they had 12 goals. It was 13-12 as the final score, correct?
Yep. Yeah. 12 goals, and all of them were like insane individual efforts. Right.
I think they had like 4 assists out of the 13, whereas Army had like 8 or something like that. So
Yep.
I'm making that up because I don't actually know, but I don't actually have it in front of me. But yeah, they had 4 assists. There you go. So 4 assists on 12 goals. Army had 10 assists on 13 goals. First of all, face-offs. You got to get it figured out. I know Coletti was involved. They involved a lot of guys. I don't know what's going on with that, but it is not the asset that it has been for Army.
Well, Coletti did not play. Commentary called it out. Yeah, commentary called out incorrectly that he was on the field. He was not. I had to actually look because they confused me.
Yeah, okay. They must have got me too. Yeah, so again, this is the they've had some decent performances as a non-Coletti face-off crew, but nothing. I mean, the performance against, I know he's a really good face-off guy, but the Lehigh guy, Dow, I think they won 4 face-offs the whole game. This is not prime Coletti by a long shot. And so you don't have that advantage, right? When Army beat Maryland, I think Army actually lost the face-off battle that time by 1 face-off, but if you're not 500 in that game, you're not beating Maryland in a first round game in the tourney. Now, what they do have going for them is that they have a really good defense, probably the best defense I can remember. They can instantly neutralize or pretty much neutralize anyone. I mean, how many goals did their top attackman have, Pietralama?
4. Oh, no, he had like 1. Yeah, they took him out of the game.
Because Pilot was on him the entire game, so it was up to Duffy. And what I see a lot in lacrosse, in the top tier of lacrosse, ACC, Big Ten, and some of the better Ivies, is a lot of individual efforts and not a lot of team offense.
Yep.
Army, on the other hand, is a lot of team offense. I think that we probably overestimated how good their offense was this year in the first few games. They score quickly. There were periods of times where they looked dull in this game. Don't get me wrong. They made it work. They got to 13 goals. That was fine, but they had huge periods of time where they just couldn't score, especially in the fourth. I think they had 1 goal the entire fourth quarter in a tight game. So, and in a close, tight game, it wasn't like they were trying to milk the clock with 12 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. They were
With
trying to score.
For the last 4 minutes, though, they were definitely
4 minutes. Yes.
Yeah. The last 4
Right.
minutes, they were trying to milk it. But yeah.
I think the goal scoring basically went 2-3, 2-3-2 to start. And so it was 6-6 about halfway through the second quarter. And it was kind of runny. And then there was a period of time where like they just didn't score. It was like 8 or 9 minutes at some point in the early third. Like they scored a goal to start the second half, and then they didn't score for a while after that. And then they got like 3 in a row quickly. And there's something about like the last few years, the offense is just sort of like consistently, with a few exceptions that I can remember, Syracuse being one of them, where they would just kind of consistently score every few minutes throughout the game. And now it just feels like it's very sporadic, and that can come back to bite you in the ass every once in a while. I think Boston was an example of that. Here, obviously, their defense did well enough. Their offense works together as a team very, very well. I don't think this is as good of an offense as we thought it was in week 4. I still think it's a better offense than they've had in recent years. They have better players, but they're not scoring in the same way. And I wonder how valuable that sort of game theory is. Iker obviously went off. If Iker doesn't go off this game, they lose.
As the year has gone on, they've scored less in settled offense and scored more in unsettled situations, for better or worse. And against Boston, they looked actively bad in settled situations. Iker scored 6. He took 12 shots and scored 6 goals. If he'd had that kind of performance last week against Boston University, the team would still be undefeated. So, I mean, go for it.
Yeah, right. And so I just, like, in previous years, Army's offense was always out there for 70 seconds of the 80-second clock, and they'd score a lot, but it was methodical. This seems a lot more, if you got a shot, take it. And so I don't know if that's better or worse in the long run against these high-powered teams.
It's interesting because, you were talking about Brady Wambach from North Carolina. He won 19 of 26 faceoffs, and yet, Army had 38 shots, North Carolina 36. Army had 21 shots on goal, North Carolina 22.
Yeah, I mean, North Carolina won the possession battle by like 3, I think.
Yeah. Army had 29 ground balls. UNC actually beat them, had 36. And it's just, on the face of it, you wouldn't think that those would be your statistics when they're winning, half again as many faceoffs, which I think just goes to show how physically the defense is playing and how many shots North Carolina was not able to even attempt to get off, which is back to your point about, the assists. Just every time you look, it was somebody getting physically pushed out of his shooting lane. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, there was that big hit of Duffy, which I did think was legal. They called him for a couple of big hits earlier in the game. But yeah, no, I mean, this keeps, at the end of the day, right? This keeps Army alive in the at-large conversation, which is all you need.
Okay, so let's talk about this now, right? Army put 5,000 people in the stands for a college lacrosse game this season. Len texted me and said, "Hey, this feels like a college football game. Looked like an awesome time on TV." Michigan is not a top tier team, but they put 3,000 people in the stands this week. Army had 3,000 last week. And it makes me wonder if Army's real popularity will put any pressure on the committee to take them over another team if 2 teams draw on the bubble, because let's just take Army Navy, for example. They're going to put 10,000 people in the stands down at Annapolis. Game will be on traditional cable TV. Are other programs doing this thing? Because I don't think they are. Just on a who cares about this game basis, that Army Navy is going to be the biggest game of the entire season. And I just, I know that there are blue bloods in the sport and all that, but it seems like time is passing these guys by, and the game is changing. And I like we were talking about the other day, James, it's like picking out bowl matchups. You got to take teams that people want, all things being equal. Yes, no, maybe.
I mean, I guess the difference between a committee and a bowl matchup is that a bowl matchup is created by a for-profit organization that wants to create a matchup to put butts in seats.
Yes. This is college sports. Yes. This is what we're doing in college sports.
The selection committee is not that. The selection committee has a list of like 7 criteria that they get to look at, and they determine who gets in and who doesn't. And the problem is, it's not like the question isn't Army putting 5,000 seats in 5,000 fans in the seats. It's okay, who are the other teams that are going to be on the bubble with them? It's going to be Syracuse. It's going to be teams that put 5,000 butts in their seats every time they play lacrosse. And it's not
right,
like
okay. So Syracuse, I'll give you, because that is a popular lacrosse program. But what other ones are putting that many?
Let me pull up the bubble right now. Duke.
Okay.
Cornell.
There's no chance that they're putting thousands of people out. There's no way.
Cornell could have 0 people show up every. I mean, here's the bigger point. Cornell could have 0 people show up every single week, and if Cornell's RPI is higher than Army's, and the Ivy League has a stronger, and they have a stronger strength of schedule, and they don't have a head-to-head loss to Army, and so on and so forth, they're not taking Army over Cornell. Even if Cornell puts 0 seats.
Come on, man. It's not like it's science, though. I mean, it's
pretty damn close.
There is a lot of subjectivity. This is like the ACC
there's
teams
really
have this great RPI because they play each other.
It's really less than you. It's less subjectivity than you think. Mm-hmm. There are very rarely bubble calls that are extremely controversial. And if they are extremely controversial, they can it's only because people think that team's really good, even though they have a bad RPI, and the committee takes the better RPI. And if you look, I kind of want to go back and look at the data, because it'd be interesting. I mean, if you look at Maryland from 6 years ago, they're playing teams like Drexel early in the season.
Right.
They don't do that anymore. The Big Ten, the ACC, and the upper Ivies all play each other, because it helps their internal RPI. And yeah, every once in a while they'll go play a Patriot League team, or they'll play a Big East team or an A10 team, because that sort of second tier of conferences provides them with enough wins to prop them up as a conference, despite kind of losing to each other without without tanking their RPI. I mean, if Army didn't play Mercer this year, they could just not playing Mercer, right? If they just played one fewer game and they didn't play Mercer, they could probably afford to lose another game in the regular season and still get an at-large. But
that's insane. That's insane.
The hit that Army takes by playing Mercer is so bad for their RPI that they are now they have to win out in the regular season to get an at-large bid.
It's nuts that adding a game has that impact.
Yeah, so I'll give you so right now Army is 8th in RPI just by playing the rest of the schedule. So let's say Army wins out, right? Army wins out.
If they don't win out, then obviously we're not.
No, including the tournament, right? Let's say they win out and they win the AQ. Assuming no other games happen, they will stay at 8. Now, I think their seeding would be a little bit higher than 8, because they'll have a head-to-head over North Carolina. They'll only have one loss. Those things will help. I can get you a list of the criteria. But now I'm going to go back and I'm going to change. I'm going to keep it. They win out. They win a Patriot League semifinal game, and then they lose to Boston again in the championship game. In that situation, their RPI is 10. They are the last team in if you go based on pure RPI, and any bid stealer, which there probably won't be any bid stealers this year. Army is probably the only potential bid stealer, but they have zero margin for error at that point. You lose one more game, you're out. If somebody else from behind you, like Michigan or someone like that, happens to win a big game, now Michigan's already got a win over Maryland. Michigan picks up a win over Ohio State. Now Michigan's in ahead of them. So, and that's pure RPI. I get it. There's like 5 criteria, right? It's strength of schedule, which doesn't help Army, RPI, which is the biggest criteria, and then record amongst teams with RPIs in 5 group rankings up to 25. So it's your record against 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, 21 to 25. Any win outside of 25 is just a win. It doesn't it only really matters at that point if you have a loss outside the top 25. So that's really what they're looking at. And if you look you can probably count on one hand the number of times in the last 10, 12 years where they brought somebody into the tournament where above somebody in an RPI ahead of them without a head-to-head win. And 2 of those are probably the COVID year where the Big Ten only played themselves and the ACC didn't play that many out-of-conference games, and RPIs were screwed up anyway.
All right, let me just say, I know that you have the contact with the RPI guru, and that would be something I would consider running on the website, like a breakdown of RPI, and you convincing me that it's actually math and not a lot of opinion.
It's actually a really simple formula. It's your winning percentage is worth 25.
Don't explain it to me now. I'm just telling you, it's like
it's 2 seconds. There are 3 parts of RPI. The first 25% is your winning percentage. The second, the next part 2 is 50%. That's your opponent's winning percentage. And part 3 is 25%. That's your opponent's winning percentage. I'm not saying it's a good metric. I'm not saying it properly encapsulates how good a team is. And I am saying it's very easy to exploit, which is what the big 3 conferences have done. But it's simple, it's clean, and it's what the committee uses. And so if we're trying to predict whether or not Army is going to get an at-large, we need to be looking at the RPI, and that's where Army sits.
All right. I find this frustrating, but what can you do? I can't believe that you would leave one of the most popular teams out of the country, out in the country, out of the tournament with all that they've accomplished with one stumble, when once again we're living in this world where it seems like every team has stumbled. Well, every team stumbled once. So
this would be 3 stumbles, right? This would be the loss to Boston in the regular season, another loss, and then a loss in the Patriot League tournament. Army would get left out. So that's a 3-loss Army. A 2-loss Army goes.
Okay. Well, I think that's fair. I mean, we understand that there's not that much margin for error. And if you look at who they've got to play, right? If they don't win the Army Navy game, they're going to get left out like that. That's been true forever. They've got nothing left but games that they should win. So, you do have to win the games you're supposed to win.
The hardest game left on the schedule, if you don't take the rivalry game in Annapolis, right? That's its own special, different kind of hard. The hardest game on paper left in the regular season is next week against Colgate on the road. Colgate, sometimes they show up and seems like they're a top 15 team, and sometimes they show up and they're like, what the hell is going on at Colgate? So we'll see which Colgate we get. They're a very hot and cold team. I'm excited. I think it'll be a good game. Face-offs. That's the biggest key to this game. Army can beat a hot Colgate if they win half the takeoffs. Okay. If Army faces a hot Colgate and wins 25% of the face-offs, we got trouble.
So let me just use this to plug my As for Lax article that will be out tomorrow, and there's kind of a detailed preview in there. So if you want to know my thoughts, I guess I won't even spoil that. That's just a tease. You guys have to check that out. Rob, you want to do a commercial for us?
Yeah. So speaking of plugging things, we've got to plug As for Football. We have Lynn Fern here, and she has been doing some great work. If you are not behind the paywall and the Patreon, you are missing out on some outstanding.
Rob Dunn froze. I guess I'm going to read this thing after all. So as Rob was saying, we have Lynn. She is taking photos, partnered with us, and we had to put those behind the paywall, friends, because we got to pay Lynn. Her time is worth something. She's a working mother of 2, right? You got 2?
Yep. Two teenagers.
2 teenagers. So, she got to feed the kids. That's just how life is, right? So at the yearling level on Patreon, you get access to Lynn's photo galleries. You get our weekly games.
Oh, all right. Something is going on with my interwebs, so Dan, please continue.
Yeah. You get our weekly games and locks of the week and early access to this very show during. And then at the Cal level, you get that stuff plus access to these live recordings during football season. And at the Firstie level, you get all of that stuff plus the chance to be in our Firsty Club, which is where all the hardcore Army sickos talk Army sports all day, every day. And I do mean all day, and I do mean every day. We've been doing a lot, as I said, on Patreon this season since Lynn joined us, like much more. So we're just, look, we couldn't do this without you guys, and we're trying to make it worthwhile for you to support us. James says that I also maybe need to mention the potential for new sponsors. That's true. We've talked about this internally quite a bit. So if you have a small business that is Army adjacent, and you would like, or at least to discuss potentially sponsoring us, we're happy to have that discussion. We have some ideas about how that might go. And again, thank you very much. We couldn't do this without you. Does anybody have a favorite thing this week? Wow. Crickets.
I have the lacrosse story that I was telling you about at the men's game.
Please.
Yeah. So it was, obviously the men's lacrosse game was just crazy. The crowd was insane. There were a ton of kids there, a ton of youth lacrosse kids there, but there were also quite a few UNC fans there, which was incredible to see. I love to see, like, when there's, that fun little chirping going back and forth and chanting back and forth. And there was a group of UNC fans that were just cheering and standing up respectfully, like kind of like, chirping at some of the Army fans and the youth players. And when Army had, every time UNC would do something like great, they would stand up and cheer and, this whole thing. And Army had scored like 3 goals back to back. And these kids like stood up, and all of a sudden they go, "We can't hear you." And it was probably one of the best things. I wish I would have recorded it, because it was just so funny, and the whole crowd went crazy. It was fantastic. So it was like one of my favorite things, because you hear that at a lot of high school games of, football games of, we can't hear you, but at a lacrosse game, a college lacrosse game, it was fantastic. Favorite thing.
That is awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to wrap the show. So if you like Army lacrosse or any other Army sports, you should really be tuning into As for Football. We got tons of coverage. I'm your host, Rob, in Fayetteville, North Carolina. We got Dano Ikebesa calling from the coast of Connecticut. We've got James from Brigade Review calling from the coast of the Gulf of America, which we're going to have to start using that this season because that's pretty funny. And we've got Lynn calling from the great state of New York. Hey, we love to do this. Always appreciate bringing you guys in, giving us the opportunity to talk shop about the Army sports teams. And make sure you follow us on the socials and sign up for Patreon. It will do us all some good. But this has been As for Football, As for Relax, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks.
Beat Colgate.
Thanks for listening to this week's As for Football, Army Football Show. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into Army football. Remember, whether you're cheering in the stands or following along from home, get all your updates on the Army football team at asforfootball.com. And as a special thanks, we would like to thank our sponsor, Jocelyn Bradley Real Estate. If you're looking to buy or sell a home, Jocelyn Bradley is the expert you need. Visit jocelynbradley.com for all your real estate needs. Don't forget, subscribe, leave us a review, and follow us on social media for all the latest updates. Until next time, go Army, beat Navy.